Welcome. Good morning. This is Talking Point on WESN, your content capital. Sean Michael Small here. My co-host Keaton Shah. He is taking some time to see to personal matters. Fear not, fret not, good people of TNT. Everything's okay with him. So sometimes you just need some time to handle some stuff. And in the meantime, Talking Point continues. Our programming on WESN, of course, continues, as you would have seen earlier this morning. Now, we have quite a bit to get through. I have more topics than usual. So let's go right into our daily review. And folks, the first story I want to touch on is, well, the situation that we find ourselves in looking at the Heritage and Stabilization Fund incurring what seems to be almost $1 billion in losses US. Now, it depends on which paper you look at. So I believe two of the daily papers have gone on record reporting the figure of 913.5 million US. Now, one of the other daily newspapers, their story had a slight different spin, more or less reporting on the recovery, or at least they had an article reporting on the recovery, framing the figures slightly different. Between the end of last year and the first quarter, the HSF gained 9%. So all in all, it seems as though we incurred losses, right, I believe it was from the investment portfolio of the HSF, which I'll get to that in a second. But it seems as though potentially we're recovering. However, to what extent is that because money was put into the HSF? Well, hopefully the $400 million US recovery, that's just capital gains. That means that things are going back on track. The worrying thing, though, was I don't think this was necessarily expected, losing approximately a fifth or a sixth of the value of the HSF just due to how investment portfolios went. Now, because, again, there was no expenditure in the last quarter of last year, if my memory serves correct. We had some extra money from our windfall in oil and gas towards the end of the last fiscal year. Money was put into the HSF. That helped offset, I think, some of the losses incurred. Here's the key. Loss is bad and all that. Yes, I understand. I'm actually willing to not necessarily blame the government. I don't think they changed the people that was managing the HSF, and they didn't necessarily take money out, right? So unless there's something I'm missing, this is more or less falls under the responsibility of the Heritage and Civilization Funds Board, right? And not necessarily the government. The key is, this is why I said, whoa, don't take praise off of something, Minister of Finance, that you did not have any direct hand in when the HSF had its profits last year, right? Or the year before. And he was singing the praises, how great is this, how great this is. Look how good we're doing, and the economy is doing great, and we have this HSF in a good position. Well, no, it was the work of the people involved at the time. So, which he did point out, but there was still a lot of, look how great things are, look how great things are. Well, that was not attributed to you, so I didn't necessarily like how much, dancing and flag waving and campaigning off of that fact the minister was doing. But to be fair, now that the HSF have incurred losses, well, it's not automatically attributed to the government, right? Maybe we'll find out more information where what I just said proves to be incorrect. But generally speaking, on the surface, looking at it, I don't think it's the government's ability when it has profits, so I can't then blame it for losses. And that's more or less how objectivity works. And I want to remind politicians to be careful when they grasp for cheap wins that technically might not have anything to do with them, because you are technically setting yourself up to take the blame when things go wrong and it's not necessarily attributed to you. So, you know what? Smarter people might disagree with me, might come out with better information. I do believe there's one person, ex-central bank governor, who is automatically disagree with my take, I believe, based off of what I read on another article from a daily newspaper today. But, you know, c'est la vie. That's my take on that. We need to move on, though. A lot to get into this morning. Regiment has found, the TTDF regiment has found the missing Galil. They have found it in Macquarie. And it's, moving on to the next story. It's a hell of a thing. So apparently they found the rifle, and the award given up for the rifle is not going to be given. But I do believe it was a tip-off. 2 individuals have been arrested and charged in conjunction with the missing Galil. It was found in Macquarie. The irony, of course, is that, well, we just had a situation where the acting commissioner of prisons was saying, don't blame us for hanging guns, Lyman. Now, I don't know if Macquarie was a drop-off point. If it was, if that was a drop-off point to try to smuggle it out of the general area, I will be kind of impressed that, I mean, maybe because it's a very public place, that's why they picked that spot. I don't know. Could it be that it was lost? I mean, I have to ask. Probably not. Charges were laid. But the responsibility of these firearms, right? Go back to the acting commissioner of prisons again. You can't take things for granted. Now, again, this is where we're not being told much, and more on that later with regards to the motive and so forth, because it's an active investigation. And I do wonder to what extent that is necessary. I do believe that we haven't necessarily been told if the weapon has been used already. Remember, because it was missing for a few days, right? So, was it lost? Was it stolen? Did they try to smuggle it out? Was it used? These are things that we don't know. To what extent will we know in a reasonable time frame? Because here's the key. What might be the time frame that the authorities operate under? Well, so much time will pass. And this is generally how one of the basic tricks to deal with crisis management. You let time pass so that the story blows over. So even if you do report on it, it's no longer a big deal, it's no longer a sensation. And a lot of the average, everyday Joe public folks aren't really going to take it on or take it seriously. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's actively being done in this situation, but I do think that they're going to be benefiting from it. I don't necessarily like it, both in this case as well as in other cases. So they found the gun, but really and truly, like I said last week, it's not necessarily about a missing gun, right? It's about the fact that we need to know, is this going to be an avenue, a path for multiple firearms to disappear, only to reappear at some other point in time when forensics realizes, well, you know, the ammunition used in shooting X, well, they match up what you would use in a Galil. The reason why I say that one gun going missing from an army barracks isn't a big deal can be found in my third story this morning. So my third story this morning, I do believe, should be, well, some good news, in a sense. Good news, bad news. More good than bad. The TTPS has seized 4 AK-47s, basically, I believe, in a traffic stop situation, roadblock, out of a car, being driven, I believe, by a Venezuelan migrant. And first of all, it was reported and armor-piercing ammunition, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay. We need to understand that assault rifles, which is not a technical term, but it's one in common usage. The bullet caliber generally tends to penetrate a lot of things that pistol bullets can't. Well, rifle caliber bullets, right? I'm not talking about small hunting rifles. We're talking about big battlefield combat rifles, which is what an AR-15 bullet caliber and an AK-47 bullet caliber technically are. AK-47 has a big bullet. And the risk of it, as opposed to, say, the guns used in the Pennywise heist, it's a bigger bullet. It could probably penetrate through thicker items that may or may not be used for cover. Your door of your car is not necessarily covered, right? So these guns were just a little bit more dangerous. They had a little bit extra danger in them if somebody used them to spray and pray. Because again, it's not just what they're technically aiming at. It's the people around them, and it's whatever is behind them. So the fact that we got these guns off the streets, kudos to the TTPS. I am very happy. It's only 4 AK-47s, but you know what? I am glad for that. Any sort of rifle taken off the streets is a good thing. Automatic rifles, it's a good thing. Now here's the cold water poured on the whole situation. At some point, the narrative said, well, a lot of the guns are coming in via legal ports of entry. It's suspected, or at least it's reported to have been suspected, that these guns probably maybe came through an illegal port of entry, or maybe that's just my speculation after reading these stories, right? I mean, Venezuelan smugglers could still use legal ports of entry. The thing with AK-47s is, and that's the key part, AK-47. So we're talking about those manufactured between in the 50s and 60s. They're very common around the world. They're very cheap. So even if we somehow dealt with American gun manufacturers and got the court in the Mexican case to say, whoa, you have to pay and you have to change all of your distribution and all of that. Well, with AK-47s, they're cheap, they're plentiful, the ammunition is plentiful and cheap. You could source it if you're a criminal, right? Between Latin America, South America, Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, you can find them. And this also proves now that potentially they could come in, whether it's legal or illegal ports of entry, they'll figure out a way. So the problem is more than just piggybacking a Mexican lawsuit against US gun manufacturers on one distributor. The problem is we can't secure borders, can't. And the problem is we have the demand for these things. Part of a situation is if you have an illegal substance, you might want to look at the demand. Al Capone got rich off of selling bootleg liquor, illegal smuggled liquor. They dealt with him mainly by cutting off the demand for illegal alcohol. That argument has been used for drugs. In fact, it's basically the argument, or one of the arguments, for the decriminalization of marijuana. Hard drugs, not everybody is willing to go there yet. But with guns now, we need to ask ourselves, what are the motivations, the reasons for the demand for weapons of this caliber? Because this is not some gangster criminal needs a handgun because he's afraid to get ambushed by other gangsters in his day-to-day life. You can't carry a AK-47 or AR-15 casually, right? So you have weapons like these in part to keep up with the Joneses when you get attacked or to attack. And this is not well, I'm out on the streets, man on the street, just, living my life, caught up in the wrong thing. No. This is, I need to defend some hardened criminal enterprise, or I'm going to attack a serious target. And if I was the government, I would be a little bit more concerned over these things, because usually the access to military type weapons is when you get issues with regards to things like coups and uprisings, etc., etc. It's probably part of the reason why it's so hard for the authorities to get a handle on what's going on in Haiti. And just note, I don't believe the vest worn by the TTPS. Maybe later on, the ASP could inform me if we have the time. They ain't gonna stop things like a bullet from an AK-47. Yeah, I believe it's military grade body armor at that point, which is very expensive. One more thing that we probably can't afford. I'm not being callous and putting a price on life. It's that expensive. Last story in this morning's daily review, and I'll touch on this a bit more tomorrow, potentially. Wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about this morning or tomorrow morning, because tomorrow is when we talk about Tobago, but I found it, it was too interesting to pass up. And that is to say, the THA currently has no chief administrator. The chief administrator, for all intents and purposes, acts like the permanent secretary of the THA from what has been reported. I tried looking it up. They didn't really have much online, at least at first pass. We know this because the deputy chief secretary apologized for the absence of the chief secretary because he's trying to deal with the fact that there is no chief administrator. From what I understand, the chief administrator is also like a main accounting officer for the THA. So it begs other questions. There will be certain things that the chief administrator is supposed to be doing. How are they doing it without anybody in the role or acting in the role? Because again, if there's someone acting in the role, then the chief secretary is not necessarily going to have to put in extra effort to deal with an absence. Because there's no absence because someone is acting. So this is just one more thing that's piling on. And again, the question lies with the THA. Is it that they are political neophytes, or what people in my generation and younger might say, the noobs? Because they're new to this. And is it that they weren't prepared? There's things that they don't know, they can't keep up because of a lack of experience, and they're making mistakes, or they look as though they're making mistakes. It's not always actual mistakes, it's a perception, and they don't know how to manage expectations and perceptions and communicate. Or is it ultimately we need a better way to pick our elected officials? Because they were supposed to be the change, and it ain't seemed that much different. The irony, of course, is it's not even so much the actions that don't seem that much different, although to some extent that is true too. But the main thing is the communication style does not seem that much different. So we have another issue, and to what extent did the people of Tobago not fully understand or are not fully aware of this issue? Would they have even been made aware if the Deputy Chief Secretary did not have to apologize the absence of the Chief Secretary at a scheduled appearance? I don't know. But folks, let's end there. When we return, well, Prime Minister had the government had an event this weekend where they launched the new administration building for the borough of Diego Martin, which is not quite yet a borough, if my memory serves correct. I'm not too sure exactly how that's playing out. But the main thing is what the Prime Minister had to say about local government. So we get into that after this. And of course, TTPS Media Ambassador ASP Ashraf Ali will be joining us after our next segment. So a lot more talking point in store. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. If you could hear the rain in the background, I apologize. Home is not as well soundproofed as the studio. So now, this weekend, government had its wonderful opening ceremony of the Diego Martin Administrative Complex. Cool. Now, I did not, so I apologize, I did not necessarily listen to the other speakers. I wanted to go straight into what the Prime Minister had to say. To get a pulse of, what message did he want to give with regards to local government and the whole issue of, Diego Martin / Siparia transitioning to a borough status. Now, he had some things to say about that, about how 1 minute some people wanted it, and then the next minute, when it's being granted, they're complaining about it. I don't know much about that. I do know that somebody who's lived in Diego Martin for most of his life, his adult life, he questioned what would actually be the purpose of going through this process. Note, if you want to change how Diego Martin is being run administratively, we have local government reform coming up, which the Prime Minister did speak about the need for, and he gave some examples, more on that later, right? But I wanted to start us off with this interesting tidbit of the Prime Minister's logic, because when he said this, it kind of made me wonder, do we have it all wrong, us in the media? Or is it that the politicians, to some extent, they kind of don't really understand, ironically, how public communication works, despite the fact that that is the major function of their job, the most important? I don't know. Well, I'll leave it up for you to decide. At first, I'll give my commentary after we cue this.
Recently, I saw I saw someone speaking on behalf of, or coming from UWI, saying that the reason why the government is so invested in local government and local government reform in what is now an election campaign is because the government doesn't have anything else to talk about. And that came out of the University of the West Indies. But I say no more about that except to say that at this moment, I want to thank a number of ministers of government going way back to the exercise that was done by Hazel Manning, the exercise that was done by Franklin Khan, and was followed by other ministers, the most recent, Haji Kazim Hussain, and now former Attorney General Faris Alwari. All of these ministers had serious responsibilities to do the groundwork, to put the country in a place where local government can become the best model for devolution of authority that this country has envisioned and has worked upon. I was in Moruga, in a public meeting in Moruga with Franklin Khan, when as leader of the PNM at the time, in opposition, saying to the people of Moruga, put us into government, and one of the things that we will do is to establish a Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. And that ministry has been established and has been functioning. Rural Development and Local Government has most recently been the ministry that has taken on the assignment to deliver on local government reform. So when you hear people talking about things that they don't know about, even though they come from the university, I ask you to ignore them as completely as you can and look at the progress that we have made, because daily, as the Calypsonian has said, daily we make progress in this country, but usually the progress is ignored in favor of the negatives. It is not to say that we don't have negatives, we have plenty of those. It is not to say that we don't have challenges, we have plenty of those. But we do have a lot of progress which we must acknowledge as I stand here today as Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West.
So, the Prime Minister is complaining about all the negatives, not reporting all the positives. Note that his only example given about progress being made is from, well, what work they did on the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, which is nice. Generally speaking, that's step one. And that was put in place much earlier in the administration's time in office. What political pundits, commentators, talking heads like myself, people in the media, opinion opiners are saying is that we're not seeing the progress made. Now, granted, I will be the first person to say we have to always remember, before COVID, we had oil and gas revenue issues. During COVID, we had a pandemic, obviously. Post-COVID, cost of food, inflation, cost of shipping, etc., etc. So it's not as though the situation has been challenging, but really and truly, what has been the line items for achievements? Now we're on local government, so let's just stick to that. With regards to the local government reform, I was the one that said, well, the main thing that they wanted was time in order to enact local government reform so they could have that win under their belts so that it would look better, they could potentially get better results in the next local government election. I didn't necessarily attribute it to any unethical behavior, except it was pointed out to me on air that what was the actual achievements in the reforms that we could see. The irony is, if you ask anybody, the only thing tangible I think most people know of about local government reform would be the property tax, which is controversial. It's not necessarily the winning strategy. Now, Prime Minister did also make a case for the property tax. And again, I can't be hypocritical. You know, we more or less supported it on the show. So I can't just say, well, everything he says is automatically wrong. No, he's right for doing so. But outside of that, what else have we seen with regards to the local government reform to say that things should be improved or improving? Because the Prime Minister did make a case for the need of the reform, and it was a pretty good one. But my point, ladies and gentlemen, with this first video is basically say, don't complain when the media, when opinion speakers don't talk about all the progress being made, because as far as we could tell, what progress? Part of the issue, like with the THA, is you don't tell us anything, and if you don't tell us anything, we're not going to know what positive things you want us to say. We can't read your minds. You have to give us progress reports and updates. The HSF, sorry, one of the things one of the implications of the HSS story is that they waited until they got like a positive tick back up before speaking about it. They didn't tell us in the last quarter of last year when the losses were incurred, that the losses were incurred. So it's very convenient when you want to give information out there. But when you want to hold things close to the chest, don't blame us for looking and seeing nothing positive worth mentioning. We can't use one or two things from earlier on and like sustain a positivity campaign. Now, I've been speaking too long. We have another clip here. It should be a couple of minutes. Let's run the next clip. This is the Prime Minister's case for local government reform. Let's go.
Those consultations took place under the Hazel Manning exercise and under the Franklin Khan exercise. All over Trinidad, we had those consultations to determine from you what you see and what you would like to have. It's all documented. So now we are in a position to move transitionally to making the changes. There's one particular change which, if we are to succeed in the level of local government reform that this government anticipates, those consultations took place under the Hazel Manning exercise and under the Franklin Khan exercise. All over Trinidad, we had those consultations to determine from you what you see and what you would like to have. It's all documented. So now we are in a position to move transitionally to making the changes. There's one particular change which, if we are to succeed in the level of local government reform that this government anticipates, we have to make a particular change. You know what it is? Currently, we have elections for local government, and we elect representatives. They go into a corporation. They are ostensibly an executive body. But do you know who really runs the corporation administratively and managerially? Is the CEO. Is the CEO. And if you ask any corporation what has been the biggest obstacle to these elected executives doing what they would like to do, they will tell you it is the fuzzy interfacing between the executive that is elected and the public servant. And the executive has to hope and pray that they get a public servant who decides to cooperate with them. There are corporations where that officer decides, for whatever reason, that he or she is in charge and not cooperating with the minister or the government. And that corporation is now turned into a eunuch. Not to mention the public service arrangement for disciplining people has nothing to do with who the people elect to run their affairs.
Now, the Prime Minister goes on with further, more detailed individual anecdotal examples, but more or less the principles of the point is made. A public servant is kind of holding hostage, potentially, an entire bureaucratic arm of government service. And we need to remember, to be fair to all elected officials, whether it's local government, parliamentarians, etc., or appointed officials, senators, etc., that a government is made up with more than just elected politicians. They're the public servants. They're the commissions and the boards and management positions, low-level positions, bureaucrats, technocrats. Not everything that goes wrong is the fault of the elected official. Now, in the long run, to some extent, technically it is, because you manage the country, we have a problem. At best, you didn't fix the problem. So now the question is, to what extent has local government just been a festering sore that nobody wanted to fix or wanted to fix effectively up till now? And therein lies the next question. Will this government's reform be effective to fix the problem and not incur new ones? Well, we don't know for sure. Again, the intention of the THA model, according to Prime Minister, was not this government alone. It was something that others who looked into it were looking at, right, from long before. Cool. But at the end of the day, this does show to the immediate need right now. That part of the issue with local government is that this is just one area in public service where someone has a fief. And you put the wrong person in and they're hard to get rid of, so it's a catch-22. Do you make it easy to fire public servants and then you see the political turnover every election? Or do you give them job security and then once you get the wrong person in, they're in for a long time and we're in for a long ride? Because they have their fief and they'll hold on to their fief. And they're the boss of their fief, and they ain't gonna listen to nobody in their fief. And right now, the Public Service Commission seems to be one of the most ineffectual bodies in public service that I have heard of in this country. Because I have yet to really hear any sort of reasonable execution of duty when it comes to holding public service to account to actually do their job. If we're going to tell politicians, do your job, we ought to tell public servants to do their job. Not all public servants, but at the end of the day, it's enough. It's enough that it's a big enough of an issue that maybe the fundamental rules that govern the public service do need to change, not just local government. Hey, somebody might have been asking for public sector reform, last year. I don't know who that person on talking point named Sean Michael Small might be, but I'll leave that there, folks. We have our media ambassador from the TTPS next. He has stuff that he wants to speak about to the public. Again, for your own health and safety. Stay tuned. Talking Point will be back after this. Well, folks, we had the acting ASP Ashraf Ali. Hopefully, he'll be rejoining me soon. I think we literally just lost him there on the internet. There, he was joining us to speak with regards to road traffic accidents, but I'm not entirely sure. Of course, he would have had information to share. There are concerns from the TTPS that the degree of fatal road traffic accidents is potentially getting to be too high. And I think at times, things like the murder rate, we focus on that. That's what gets the clicks on the online articles or the views or the purchases on the newspaper articles. But things like fatal road traffic accidents, probably for at least the majority of citizens, might be technically a bigger risk than, say, a shooting, right? I mean, I would hazard, I guess, for myself, outside of maybe something I might say on this show that might get me in hot water. For the most part, I have to be more actively concerned with regards to road traffic accidents, especially if I'm on the highway, any sort of relatively, in TNT, long distance, relatively high speed driving, especially when it's, late at night, etc. That's going to be the more dangerous encounter than me randomly on the streets having to worry about somebody, shooting me. I'm not involved in anything, so I don't have to worry about that. I do have to worry about how I drive and how other drivers drive. So we are joined by acting ASP Ashraf Ali, TTPS media ambassador. I could see him there fine-tuning his camera. I have primed the audience, SPLE, on the topic, the concerns that the TTPS has with regards to fatal road traffic accidents. Now, I believe you would have the actual data of why this is concerning. So if you could fill us in.
Yes, so good morning again. And it's always a pleasure to be here. This rainy day, rainy season as upon us. And it's kind of fitting that we started to discuss the issues of the road when it comes to with the rain, because that adds a serious dynamic when it comes to the road. Unfortunately, all figures for 2023 thus far, it's 47 road fatalities we have thus far. Last year at this point in time, we had 44, which is about seven fatalities more. That's not good. That's not good. We continue to try to encourage the public to observe the roads, understand the seriousness of driving on the roads and the requirements of driving on the road. Now, how much more can we tell drivers? How much more can we reinforce that it's not about an accident alone? It's when the accident becomes very serious and it turns out to be a fatality. That is where you pay the ultimate price. No, notwithstanding that the driver may be the one who is the fatal victim. At the end of the day, someone just lost their life. Now, if the driver is not the victim, then we also have some other challenges, because the driver of that said vehicle can be or subjected to what we call causing death by dangerous driving. And he or she will have to answer those questions, because they will be brought before the courts to answer those questions. And this is where it is not about a fatality only. It's now where the law states that under indictment, you can face up to 15 years in jail for causing death by dangerous driving. And drivers need to understand that it is serious. And notwithstanding the law, the criminal offense of causing death by dangerous driving, you also have civil matters that can arise where the occupants of that vehicle can sue because of the fact that some family member may have passed the loss of life. So all of these things drivers need to consider and understand what is taking place. Now, when you look at what dangerous driving is, it's simple. It simply states that for discussion purposes, very simple. Whatever the average competent driver and careful driver will do, if you do anything outside of that, is considered to be dangerous driving. So let's put it where where a lot of Trinidadians like to break a traffic light. Both green, amber, and red. Red is extremely dangerous. But it doesn't say that a green is also dangerous. And the law, there's case law specifying this, that you have a duty of care to yourself, that if you're approaching a green light, that you must ensure that when you're proceeding through the green light, it is safe to do so. Not because that you have a green light, you are automatically, and it is automatic that I have the right of way. You have a duty of care to yourself, as well as the occupants of that said vehicle, to take as much care as possible going through the red light. We have a situation where, and you listen to the person speak that my light was green, so I have the right of way. Yes, legally you have, but you also have a duty of care to ensure that going through the green light, you take as much precaution as possible. Right? So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, now to what extent is drunk driving caught up into all of this? Because usually how the story goes, a drunk driver causes an accident, other people lose their lives. Somehow, the drunk driver, more often than not tends to survive. Do we have, I know that people in the country drive under some degree of influence of alcohol, somewhat a regular occurrence in TNT. But is that like a leading cause or major concern with the actual fatalities that we're seeing on the road?
It plays a role. All right, I don't have a data to support how many drunk drivers was involved in accidents, because in the accident investigation, and this is really not to a lot of persons not understanding this investigation, they find it takes too long, right? And the police is not doing what they're supposed to do. Just to note, a fatal road traffic accident does not have a statutory period. It never finishes, right? So it means that if you are going to be charged for causing death by dangerous driving, it can take up from close to a year all the way up to 15 years and more. So it's just showing the expanse of it. It could go beyond that, because the coroner's inquest. So all these matters go before coroner's inquest. And in the coroner's inquest, the coroner will determine whether or not, based on all the facts and evidence presented to the coroner, whether or not you, the driver, contributed to and all your action supports causing death by dangerous driving. And this is where the coroner will say, charge the individual for, but we stand trial for causing death by dangerous driving. Now sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish what you have to say.
Right. So the investigation for a fatal accident is extremely extensive. From the first aspect of it, where the officers come on the scene, they have to take measurements, they have to take statements, and I'm talking about a lot of statements from everybody that is involved. We have things like statements to take from the witnesses, from the drivers, from the other victims and the other occupants of the vehicle. They would request statements. You have to send the vehicle for inspection, and the inspection is through the licensing office, inspection division. They will determine whether or not that vehicle had any particular defects that would have contributed towards the accident, right? Then we have toxicology reports that we have to get after we do the autopsy. So the autopsy would have to give us information that the death was as a result of or emanating from that accident.
Well, I know we're talking about fatal road traffic accidents, but then there's the fact that you could have violent collisions that might not end with fatalities. Everybody might be lucky, but I know of situations where people got seriously injured. To what extent, does criminal proceedings work out in similar measure?
So they all follow the same principle. So a serious RTA follows the same principle as that of a fatal RTA. The only difference is, from a serious RTA, you don't have to send to a coroner's inquest to get directives to charge the individual. You can recommend careless driving and driving without care, due care and attention for a serious RTA. But in a serious RTA, we do not know whether or not some persons in a serious RTA would survive or not. So we have to treat with it in the same manner.
Right. I said to say they might be going off to the hospital. They might not survive. You need to start the investigation as though, everything is your ducks all in a row in case it gets escalated to that point.
Yes, it can also be a fatal. We already started the process, because we can't go back. We don't want to go back and start over our process, because at the end of the day, the trauma, we have to understand that the trauma exhibited and the persons that are going through this trauma, right? I talk family members and everybody else, the victims and other persons, we have to be, we are also sensitive to that fact also, right? And so there's a lot of things that has to go in place. We have CCTV footage that we pull together. We have the police photographer go and take measurements, take photographs of the accident. We do a sketch plan of the entire event, where it located all of that. All of that is compiled into investigative reports and an investigative file, and we put that, and then we make recommendations that based on everything that we identified and the investigation revealed, that we make a recommendation that the file be sent to the coroners pending the outcome of the investigation. And that is where everything is go. And the coroner's inquest is where this whole thing plays off. So technically, it's the coroner's inquest is just like as it is an inquest, where all the evidence is presented there, and if it fits the requirements, it goes forward to the courts.
ASPLE, we need to stick up in there. We have to break now for news on the hour. So stay with us. Of course, we'll have our phone line opened up for callers when we return here on Talking Point on WESN, your content capital. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned, folks. Phone lines coming up next. Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Just before we open the phone line, something that the ASP did say, and he reminded me of it with regards to, reasonable drivers, experienced drivers, in the eyes of the court, what would the common, average, reasonable, experienced driver do? So one of those terms, I believe, ASPLE, you wanted to kind of get into to explain, because I did forget to ask, what exactly do those mean? Because the way how some people drive in this country, on the propensity of the bad, aggressive, reckless driving that we have, the average does not look like a good baseline to establish what's reasonable, sometimes at least.
Exactly. And when you look at what we consider to be the reasonable person, the reasonable person might be the reasonable man. In the law, they use the word reasonable man. And the reasonable man would be an individual who is not under the influence of alcohol, who is not under the influence of drug, has no history of any mental or other illness. In that capacity, so your all the senses are there, and you would take the most safest approach in dealing with certain things. For on the road, it forms the same principle in that you driving for 20 years, it is considered to be that you are a reasonable, careful driver because of the experience that you have on the road. So it would be considered that you will be measured upon someone who has that experience of 20 years, as opposed to somebody who only have the driver's permit for 5 years, 10 years. So you will be mirrored upon on that level of experience. Now, we hear a lot of Trinidadians talk, I'm an experienced driver and I drinking and driving long time. But I have told a lot of persons that when you go to do a driving test, at no point in time do you do a driving test under the influence of alcohol or drug. So then how could you say that you are an experienced driver and I could drive under the influence of alcohol and consider to be I am reasonable? It can never be.
So I'm going to say something that you might not like to hear, that might be a little controversial, but I knew of somebody who was actually quite capable in his youth to drink all the alcohol and mix all the alcohol and then drive. The key point is in his youth. So the irony is, the more experience he got, the less able he was to do this incredible feat that should not happen. And I think part of the thing is we take it for granted, and there's a reason why we have the laws. You're not supposed to, just because you can do it, doesn't mean that you should do it We're not supposed to do it. And at some point, yeah, you did it when you was 25. 35, you can't do it anymore. You take it for granted. You try to do it, and then something goes horribly wrong. And it's why you're not supposed to do it. So I do find that interesting with regards to the whole experience point. I tend to have even less faith in somebody that's mixing alcohol and driving when they're an experienced driver, because, drinkers know that age catches up with you.
And considering the fact that you are an experienced driver, you already know the risk that you're going to take. And these things will, in fact, impact the decision making in court.
Right.
It will work against you because your experience would say alcohol, and I'm using the context of alcohol because of the fact that it will show that you are an experienced driver. You know the risk, similar of breaking a red traffic light. You have been driving for so long, you know over the years, breaching of a red traffic light, there is a risk, right? And you are still taking the risk. And that is where anytime you're here, you have that you continue to add to the risk or understand that the risk is there, and you get yourself in a fatal accident and you cause the death of an individual. All of these things will impact your matter.
One last thing before we open up the phone lines, I want to ask. I wasn't too sure if I should ask this, but given I want to ask this given what you just mentioned. It's late at night. I'm talking, midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and there's a red light, and there's no other cars on the road. Now, I know of a case where somebody around the savannah around midnight, at a traffic light, I believe there was an attempted carjacking or an attempted robbery. I don't know if they wanted the car, if they wanted his wallet or what have you, right? But he was more or less attacked, right, in his vehicle at a traffic light around the savannah. So I myself, more often than not, find it very uneasy to kind of sit at a red light and, I'm not talking highway and or some kind of blind corner where you hope no one's coming. You could tell that no one is coming, and it's very, you're a sitting duck. Is there any sort of leeway in the law for that? Because people have said, well, at 3 in the morning, I'm not waiting on a red light.
Okay.
Because you don't feel safe. That's me. It's not about the convenience of it. Because I have waited at many a red light that, there's nothing there, but it's a red light, I'm going to wait. But the safety side of it there, where you're just a sitting duck for however long it takes, is not necessarily something that people want to go through.
And that falls on the same principle as a green traffic light, where you're coming up and you see a green traffic light, and you automatically say that, hey, listen, I have to go through a green traffic light because I have the right of way. Good? You would have exercised due care and attention coming through a green light. And I'm saying that even though you're at red traffic light, you choose to breach the red traffic light, it must have mitigating circumstances in how you choose to do it. You would have added the instances of safety and security based on the location that you're feeling unsafe. But at the same time, you're seeing nothing coming both sides or in any way at all. If there's nothing coming and you make a decision in the interest of your safety to breach a traffic light, well, that's your mitigating circumstance, right? That's your decision making based on this current situation. But the issue or the always raised will come up with that if an incident took place, if you decide to breach the red traffic light, you have to justify your decision. Why did I do all of this? Because of the red traffic light. It's not that it cannot be, I just don't have time to sit down and wait. That can never be the decision. It has to be a certain situation where you both something like where you just express safety and security, concern for the environment, the area that the person is. The person made a concerted effort to view and see that there's absolutely no other traffic coming anywhere else. And based on all of that, the driver decided to proceed cautiously across the red light and going about his business. Right? So these are certain things I'm saying that as an experienced individual, You have to understand the risk and assess those risks. So it's not a hard and fast rule, just like it is not a hard and fast rule like when you have a green light, that once I reach the green light, I could go straight across and everybody else have to wait for me. No,
Yeah.
the laws, you have to proceed with some level of caution, right? So this is how we have to assess those situations.
Well, okay. And folks, if you ever see me driving and you're annoyed that I stopped, even though I'm supposed to have the right of way, that more or less is the philosophy why I have done that many times in the past. Whether it's a green light, whether it's a no traffic light, but I have the right of way because I don't want to take it for granted, and it has annoyed the people behind me who they're accustomed to just blowing right through. But I mean, we all have to determine how safe we want to be on the road. We have to end it there because I don't want to shortchange our viewers in case the phone line is working and we have, many people who want to call in. So, folks, going to open up the phone lines now. Of course, ASPLE is available if you have any questions, concerns, praises for the TTPS. Do you want somebody to represent them? This is one of the few instances we have somebody in front of the public willing to take questions. It seems as though in government service, that's a rarity. So the phone line should be open there. We have 6284578. Call in. Let us, know what you have to think. Of course, I spoke in rapid fire a few stories well at the top of the show, and then I went into a couple of concerns coming out of the Prime Minister's remarks from the ceremony for the new Diego Martin administrative building. So there's a lot to chew into, and of course the weekend happened, so there's always more stories than we know of. So we have a caller on the line from Chaguanas. Good morning, caller. If you could just raise the volume level so that we could hear.
Get a phone from some other company. This phone you have here is totally useless.
Well, we now open up the line, Professor. We now open up the line. Good morning.
But you know how much weeks I'm trying to get on?
How much?
Anyway, the
as in
Prime
today
Minister
or last week?
about this local government reform and property tax. And everything is documented. I have repeatedly pointed out that under that exercise, the regional authorities asked to collect their property tax. The government put up an inquiry. The inquiry agreed. This you could go to the government treasury and buy a copy of it. But when they did, they even get a company from Jamaica to review the Municipal Corporations Act to do it. And when they did go to court, they didn't use that one. They went and do the opposite. And instead of giving the regional authorities the authority to collect property tax, they took away the city and borrow property tax. I have not seen this documented anyway. So that is one thing that is missing on that. As regards the police and them, I have repeatedly tell you all what they don't do. And unless they do it, we're going to have a breakdown in law and order, which we have throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Any questions, gentlemen?
No, I totally agree with you, especially that last part. The one of the bugbears is the Eastern Main Road and just letting the no parking not be enforced. That's just one example. So I totally understand,
Look,
Professor, where you're coming
today
from.
that don't have a proper camber. So water keeping in the middle make it dangerous. If nobody do their work, and that's the problem, you get killed. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Ironically, that's one of the points that the Prime Minister made with regards to, some contractors get paid even though they don't do the work, and the way how the system is right now, they have no recourse in order to prevent these things from going on. He gave an example of one woman saying that her husband was in jail and she was still collecting checks, so he was still collecting checks working for the corporation. We have a call on the line from El Socorro. Good morning.
Yes, good day, good morning, Sean. Good morning to the SP.
Morning, sir.
I want to congratulate the police in the arresting of a Venezuelan at the Debe roundabout with a cache of arms, ammunition, AR-15, and all sorts of, magazines, a roadblock exercise at the Solomon Hochoy Highway Extension in Debe, under the supervision of Senior Superintendent Richard Smith and his forces. The Venezuelan does not speak English. The police describe him as a courier. So it is left to be seen whether my good friend from Venezuela, once the translator gets into place, whether he would identify his jefe, Sean. Jefe is the word, the Spanish word for boss. I'm waiting with anxious anxiety because 99%, I believe, chances that he would not speak or disclose who is his jefe. But I'm glad the police are working on this. Is working on these, to say roadblocks and all these arms and ammunition and guns need to come off the streets. But ASP, do you think the Venezuelan would speak? Thank you very much.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah. I go. Based on some of our experiences interacting with these individuals, they would. Just like any criminal elements, the risk that they take is that if they get caught, they pay the brunt. So they face the criminal charges by not giving up their bosses and their counterparts. So those are the risks that they already plan to take. And they're not going to get them to say anything. So it's very difficult to even try to get that individual to speak, considering the fact that he doesn't even speak English. Right, so it means that they have to get an interpreter to do all of that. And getting an interpreter, it's a risk. It's also a risk by itself because he has to tell the interpreter who has to tell us. Right. So
yeah, we might not realize how complex it is. The movies make it seem as though it's automatic, except when things get real conspiratorial. But we have a call on the line from Diego Martin. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning, ASP.
Good morning,
question to the ASP. First up, there was a Galil rifle that went missing from a San Juan police station a couple of months ago. The fact we have recovered the regiment's firearm, what is the status of that? That is still out there. That could account for many lives. I'm not hearing anything from the police in respect to that. So that is something the police, if I am to gain confidence in the police, they have to tell me where and how quickly they could do it, because the only difference I'm seeing is now that they retrieved it. Is the defense force was part of the investigation? Does the defense force have to come into the police service to help them with that now? The second issue is, and I'm talking about what I read in the newspaper, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, the $7 billion TT dollars that apparently unaccounted for or lost. And I'm going back to a Coleman Commission of Inquiry report that is sitting under the TPP for the longest while. There are recommendations for criminal actions against certain people. That is where we have to go, because the chairman of the board of the HSF fund is the former central bank governor who had questions to answer. So what I'm saying, if you continue to put the same people in the same place, you get the same sort of unwanted behavior in the management of my taxpayers' money. You know what $7 billion could do in hard times? And the third and the least important thing, the culture that when you reach in front of a street light in the middle of the night is to go through. I had the experience driving in Brazil and in Jamaica. In the night when you hit a red sign, you look left, right, center, and you go across, because in the back of your mind, somebody in the bushes could come with an AR-15 in front of your face. I hope the ASP could respond to the very first question, and have a nice morning. Thank you all.
Well, just before he does, a couple of things. One, it was AK-47s, not AR-15s. I know that was from a previous caller a while back. It wasn't necessarily this caller that was found. The distinction matters because I actually think the AK-47s are even more dangerous. With regards to the HSF, if the losses were based off of investments, I do believe it's the same people that got us something like $1 billion the year before in profits or gains. So, that's the thing with investments. It's you're going to incur losses, especially if the market has turmoil and volatility, and it's not like a formula you just plug in. To some extent, random things will happen that's difficult to predict. So you just have to roll with it if you want your money in an investment portfolio. It comes with risks. If you want it in a mattress, if you want to put the HSF in a mattress, then we would not have the opportunity for it to grow as we've seen it before to a significant degree. So I don't know if it's fair now to whatever past accusations attribute to the chairman of the HSF board. We do have a caller, ASPLE, so just stick a pin on that from St. James. We'll come back to that police Khalil missing rifle afterwards. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, good morning, Sean, and good morning, officer, and the listeners. And I like the program about the driving, and I just want to say I used to be very often on the road at night, late night, and the lights on the highway. Many years ago, I used to, when you see the light at a distance, you speed up, and by the time you speed up, the light changed to red. Now, because you could see the lights from far in the night, and then now I started a new thing that when I observe, look, the light not on red, and at a great distance, I come up slow. Sometimes I even slow down below the average speed limit, and the light change, and then it change back again, and time it come back to green, I now approaching and get through the light. That worked many times for me because I used to transport some workers at night, so I used to be on the road often. And then the other thing is cars now are so much faster when young people drink and they drive, and when you drop asleep, the thing is that your foot is automatically go down in the gas. And cars are so fast now, the average little cheap car giving you 160 kilometers, that is near 100 miles per hour. And so on. So you was right that people who feel they're driving 10 years and 5 years, they are really novices, right? But another great thing helped me in my years of driving, not having a serious accident, is always sticking within the speed limit. And then there was once I went on party and had to drop people in 3 different locations in South and then come to St. James. And while approaching Caroni, I started to feel sleepy. I turn up my music, I slap in my face, all kind of thing, and I just could not hold up. So I pull aside by the Caroni Bridge and I leave all my lights on my car in idling position and all of that, and recline the thing and sleep. I drop asleep there, and then suddenly I just jump up and realize, well, I sleep for a while, I wake up in a kind of panic, but still I get a 5 minutes. There was another instance that happened to me, and I was near to a police station. So I pull and I park near to the police station there, and I sleep. I sleep for about 5 minutes and so on. And then too, when I did learn regulations, one of the things the instructors always teach me to approach the green traffic light with caution, because you have the right of way, but sometimes you could be dead right. You understand? You could die having the right of way. So you all keep up the good work. Nice program. Bye.
Thank you, caller. ASP, we need to get to that question about the missing police weapon. If you can, we're almost on the time for the show.
All right, so that one, I don't have any updates on that. But I made a note, so I think I'll have to actually inquire as to what is the status of that, and I'm gonna get back to you all in the next time.
Well, with regards to the last driver, thanks for that. I do that more or less at times. I'm not trying to make the red light, so I'll also kind of slow down. I've never got it so good where any distance I slowed down to keep my momentum so I don't have to come to a complete stop so that the light goes through its cycle and comes back to green so I could just keep rolling smoothly. I've never achieved that. So kudos to you if you've had. And the one thing with sleeping late at night when you're tired at some random roadside in this climate, especially, I don't know if the police could,
This environment may not support that type of thing, but the last caller was right. When you have to drive long distances and you know your body is tired and you want to take a rest, find out that you need to take that rest. You need to take that rest, and it's because those cannot be excuses when an accident takes place. Because there's case law also for that, where if it is that you know that you are tired, then it means that you are no longer you're admitting to the risk and you're going beyond, you're taking the risk. So then you're really and truly, you are now driving in a dangerous manner because the risk is there and you're accepting that risk, so you're driving dangerously at the same time. Right?
Yeah, it's like the caller said, your experience, so you should know better.
Exactly.
Well, folks, we have to cut the show there. We're out of time. I want to thank all of the callers who called in. Of course, thank you to the TTPS Media Ambassador, Acting ASP Ashraf Ali, for once again, facing the firing line of questions from the public, not just coming on to kind of give his little presentation as many a public figure does. And of course, saying hello to Keaton if you could hear me, and all of the staff at WSN. I am home. I'm not in the studio. Hopefully, I'll be rectified tomorrow, where we will see you folks tomorrow for another edition of Talking Point. It's a good day to have a good day, even with all the rain, because at least it's cool. This weekend was really hot. So let's enjoy the cool breeze, maybe not so much the water. Hopefully nobody floods today. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.